Today, let's discuss if the GNOME Foundation has a spending problem. We'll go through some of the reports here, which include their annual reports on finances, and there seems to be widespread community skepticism on whether or not GNOME can pull themselves together, but everyone seems to be hoping for a positive change. So in the annual report for 2022 through 2023, we get information such as a letter from the board about GNOME, their mission statement, including highlights, which I'm going to post a link in the description below so you can read the report yourself. But what I'm quite interested in is what's at the bottom of the report. Here we have some financial overview information, and we get a feel for how the GNOME Foundation makes its money. So we have income from the 2022 year and 2023 as well. These include things such as conferences, support and infrastructure, outreach, GIMP, administrative, and fundraising. And we can see a breakdown of how each of those made money. So the blue here was conferences, orange being from GIMP, and then finally fundraising, which will typically make up a majority of the income. Raised $171,000 in 2022 and $422,000 in year 2023. Now that's all fine and dandy, but even with being free and open source, there's a lot of money that it takes in order to keep running GNOME and all its infrastructure, and of course administration, which are some of the biggest expenditures. This here we have a category called expenses, and it doesn't take much to realize that they're running at a complete deficit for at least the last 2 years, around $650,000 in total expenses in year 2022 and $675,000 in year 2023. The places where they spent most money is conferences in both years, followed by administrative tasks to run the foundation, and finally running fundraisers themselves. So what does this tell us about the GNOME Foundation's financial management? Well, the question is, how much of a discrepancy do we have over the income and expenditures here? Are they effectively utilizing resources of the development of GNOME software? Well, there's definitely one big glaring issue that they had over the last year, which we're going to discuss. But let's see about how much of a deficit they're running from. So we went from 363 came in, 650 went out. Running some rough numbers, that is negative 287K deficit in the year 2022. And in 2023, we have rough numbers again, $119,000 of deficit in 2023. And overall, when we look at these numbers, well, this deficit in 2022 was almost 300 grand, which is a large total of the overall income for 2022. So that's a little scary. And then 119,000 deficit. Well, we can almost call that about a fifth of all earnings in 2023. So that gap has definitely come down. Well, we're left with mixed reactions from the community, including things like frustration and dissatisfaction, because they want greater accountability and transparency from the GNOME Foundation regarding these financial decisions, because the GNOME Foundation has been operating at a deficit for over 3 years now, relying on reserves from previous donations. And then discussing the robotic tendencies on an April 26, 2024 update from the GNOME board, finances, which we're going to read here in a moment, the GNOME Foundation is running into an issue where it cannot approve further deficit budgets due to hitting its reserve policy limit, which is a big deal. How is GNOME going to turn this around? What do they blame it on? Well, let's read here. As you are aware, the GNOME Foundation has operated at a deficit, nonprofit speak for a loss, i.e. spending more than we've raised each year for over 3 years, essentially running the foundation on reserves from the substantial donations received 4 to 5 years ago. The foundation has a reserves policy accounts, which specifies a minimum amount of money we have to keep in our accounts. This is so that if there is any significant interruption to our usual income, we can preserve our core operations while we work on new funding sources. We've now hit the buffers of this reserve policy, meaning the board cannot approve any more deficit budgets. To keep spending at the same level, we must increase our income. So this poses a great challenge to the GNOME Foundation and its board, because they're going to have to focus on key areas, including cutting spending, more strategic development and fundraising, and filling in some of the board members using elections. But let's talk about their top priority right now as they see it from the foundation and the board. One of the board's top priorities is in hiring Holly, which we're going to talk about Holly in a moment. Last name Million. Yeah, that's a little ironic. Hopefully they'll be bringing in millions for the GNOME Foundation. But anyways, was therefore her experience in communications and fundraising and building broader and more diverse support for our mission and work. Her goals since joining, as well as building her familiarity with the community and project, have been to set up better financial control and reporting, develop a strategic plan, and start fundraising. You may have noticed the foundation being more cautious with spending this year because Holly prepared a break-even budget for the board to approve in October so that we can steady the ship while we prepare to launch our new fundraising initiatives. You can read about some of this. I'll also post this in the description below, but they have information about strategy strategy and fundraising, board development, elections, and so on and so forth. So who is Holly Millian? Well, the GNOME Foundation welcomes Holly Millian as the executive director, who has a background in nonprofit leadership, filmmaking, teaching, public speaking, and writing, and she has a commitment to empower individuals to make a positive impact that align with the values and goals of the GNOME Foundation. Holly brings 3 decades of invaluable experience to nonprofit management. She served as a consultant director of development and executive director and board member for numerous organizations, and notably founded the nonprofit organization Artists United. So it is nice to see that the GNOME Foundation is already making proactive steps in order to correct these deficits, with Holly joining the team here, and they seem to be fairly confident that with the leadership and experience that Holly has, that they are going to be able to turn things around, because they're going to have to. If they're going to continue working, they cannot take away any more money from the reserves because they can't operate in such deficits, forcing them to get creative. Some of you might remember that GNOME received $1 million from the German government, being recognized as public interest infrastructure, which was given from the Sovereign Tech Fund, with a lot of difficult engineering going into place, developing things like their desktop environment and improve their graphics and image manipulating tool known as GIMP. They have a 5-year strategic plan drafted in order to try and get themselves out of this mess, including new goals, priorities, and strategies that are not only going to advance the ecosystem, but try to improve their financial standing. Will GNOME exist in the coming years? Well, hopefully, because it is a large pillar in the FOSS community. Their strategic goal number 1 is people. They want to grow their existing community of creators and users, and they have some tactics to do so, including creating a shared unified vision for the foundation and project, creating more inclusive leadership model, building board processes so the board can work, and build staff processes so the team can work more efficiently. This is all considered inward for the community, and then a outward objective here is to communicate the social benefit of GNOME by describing how GNOME directly empowers people, activate more diverse underserved communities, create GNOME Pathways Initiative, aka an education program that recruits, mentors, educates, and involves people. Objective 3 is to increase commercial and economic value of GNOME, for example, creating a badging program, aka powered by GNOME, so users can buy GNOME approved devices, create more commercial and other partnerships that drive increase in users and creation for more apps, support the use of GNOME technologies in other contexts. Then we got strategic goal number 2, which involves initiatives, consciously integrate, with objective 4 being consciously integrate our technologies and services, claim the value of what GNOME has created over 25 years, promote the GNOME Development Initiative, and explicitly integrate official sponsorship for FlatHub apps, including GNOME Circle apps, strengthen critical weaknesses in IT infrastructure and security, identify those weaknesses, and then create documentation for GNOME as a whole. Objective 6 includes reorganizing our events to be more streamlined, creating a more strategic, inclusive, and less expensive worldwide annual event, use a franchise structure with regional engagement and local relevance, create a funding model that allows the central event to be self-sustaining and generate profit, and then identify the market to new outward-facing diverse audiences. Finally, we get down to the strategic goal number 3, capacity and infrastructure. Claim and document. Their objective here is to claim and document the impact and value. Document and claim in writing through support cases and slide decks what we've accomplished in the last 25 years. Quantify our impact and numbers through charts and graphs and portfolios. Objective 8, double the annual expense and revenue budget of the GNOME Foundation. Tactics will include seeking funding for GNOME development, 2, harness the power of the community through crowdfunding, 3, create fundraising case around FlatHub, 4, develop direct funding relationships, at least with 20 new foundations, and finally, objective 9, prioritize the health and well-being of the foundation itself. Tactics include developing a process through the board that ensures program decisions integrate and protect the stability of the foundation. Number 2, create better relationships, partnerships, and connections. 3, prevent staff burnout and inefficiency. 4, increase staff capacity and hire an administrative support contract, and hopefully additional people with event and fundraising staff. Now, these are overall great strategic goals or initiatives here, but is GNOME too far down the road to actually create this? They're talking about doubling their spending, including doubling the amount that they make per year, which seems like a very lofty goal to have, especially when you're facing financial challenges with the past 3 fiscal years. They're definitely trying to take proactive steps here to address these issues and achieve financial stability, especially with this strategic planning, more investment in the community, and better leadership. But what do you think about this deficit for the GNOME Foundation? Do you think this is going to affect its core products such as the GNOME Desktop or GIMP? Is this 5-year strategy clear enough? Are they focused on the correct things? These are all questions that I still kind of have, because I personally have a mixed reaction, is because I do have concern and a little bit of criticism here about this plan. I am definitely hoping for the best and positive changes here in the future as this strategic plan gets implemented, but I do like this transparency and hopefully a little bit more accountability in the financial practices that they'll be able to turn this around. After all, their mission, the GNOME Foundation, is a nonprofit organization that believes in a world where everyone is empowered by technology they can trust. We do this by building a diverse and sustainable free software personal computing ecosystem, but there's a lot of competition out there, especially in the desktop space nowadays, where we may be seeing a switch in what default desktop environments that distributions are including. That would majorly affect desktops like GNOME, especially with one of my favorite desktops coming to fruition here soon. The Cosmic desktop environment built on Rust feels like it's going to be a strong competitor for all the desktop environments that are currently available on the Linux market. How much of an effect is that going to make? One can only tell as soon as Cosmic Desktop gets released, as it's being ported to many different Linux distributions already. We'll know soon. Hopefully GNOME can get their finances straight and continue developing as they have in the past. For those of you that want to donate, you can help the GNOME Foundation by going to their website. I'll post a link in the description below, and support the future of GNOME. There's all sorts of information about their development fund and how to become a GNOME backer. Make sure to subscribe below for more videos like this. I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Linux can be hard to understand, but I take the most commonly used terms, commands, and subjects in Linux, and I break them down into simple to read documents, including Linux terms, flashcards, a checklist, a cheat sheet, and a mind map. And if you're ready to level up your Linux experience and knowledge, go to learn.savvynik.com now and get access to these sheets.